What are the reasons why Trump extended the ceasefire indefinitely instead of putting a timeline? That's because when I heard the news, I was very curious, but I was also a little upset at first because we all thought the ceasefire was going to end and war would resume.
Okay, so because the blockade seems to be working very effectively, why even stop the ceasefire given that the blockade is doing something that the military operations couldn't? It's a lot more effective, it's a lot cheaper, it's hurting the Islamic Republic, and it's very efficient because the military operations cost more and at the same time it risks American lives. So the Islamic Republic is really hurting because of the blockade. And you could also see that is causing a lot of division within the Islamic Republic. You are seeing a lot of internal fighting. I think the Islamic Republic itself prefers to go back into a fight because once the military operations are happening, at least there's some unity within the regime itself, right? So we don't have unity between most of the Iranian people and the regime, but so we don't have a rally around the flag effect as many other Western media commentators suggest. But the war does cause some unity among regime supporters. So the ceasefire causes division among them. Military operations causes some unity among them. So that's why the regime actually prefers fighting with the United States on the battlefield rather than at the with diplomacy at the negotiating table. This is not a comfortable situation for them to be at all. So when your enemy is fighting against itself, why stop it? Why not just go with it, right? Why not just continue to hurt them financially in a much more effective way that you weren't even able to achieve? I mean, President Trump even confirmed what we suspected, that the blockade is more effective than the military operations, right? So that's the answer, because it's more effective.
I did see that they're fighting against themselves. Thank you.
Yeah. Ali, what do you think about the strategy, the indefinite? By the way, we also saw Axios coming out and saying that it's not indefinite, that President Trump is giving them 3 to 5 days. So we also have to keep that in mind. But Ali, go ahead. What's your views?
Yeah, I think as I said yesterday, like right when it came out, obviously it's just way more effective. It costs less in every positive way. It's more worthwhile to do the blockade. What I did find interesting was that I said, "Hey, if I was Vahidi, I'm gonna put the other guys under house arrest," and then like 2 minutes later, we see like these unconfirmed rumors that they were put under house arrest. So I think what is probably going to happen from the IRG side is that they're going to have to eventually consolidate and have to be able to give some sort of unified response. Even if they're not going to surrender or give up the uranium or whatever, they're going to have to band together at one point or another. And it seems like Vahidi has the upper hand because he has all the guns. From the US and Israeli side, obviously we're going to start focusing more on the people in like the coming months. As Jeffrey said, maybe like, some sort of like material aid can also be provided, but that also has its own difficulties. But it's just a matter of weeks before they get even more desperate. I think right now they're trying, like, we repeatedly see them try to be all strong. Hey, we're not gonna give up to your demands. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. And every single card is being taken away from their hand as time goes on. So I'm waiting to see. At this point, is the next card going to be the militias abandoning them because they just can't pay them? Reals are worthless. They want to be paid in USD because if they leave Iran, they want to be able to use it. We already know that the regime's sanctioned and all that. So if you guys are watching on YouTube, the discussion group is roughly a week ahead on whatever news that comes out. I'm like scrambling my brain. I'm trying to find out what can the regime do, and it's not much. It's really not much anymore. I think they just wait it out and adopt their original strategy. Their day one strategy was, hey, we're just going to wait it out, see if we can wait it out, and we're seeing how that's working out for them. So
My my concern is that let me try to play devil's advocate and find ways for the Islamic Republic to survive and see how possible this is. My concern is that what if it takes very, very little money and resources to do three things, right? To shoot at the Iranian people if they want to do an uprising, and get some speedboats with some people on it with guns to shoot at commercial ships trying to go through the Strait of Hormuz, and then have certain soldiers with guns to shoot at anybody who wants to come and take out the enriched uranium. Okay? Like, what if it takes very little effort, very little manpower, and very little money to just do these three things indefinitely? How would you respond to that?
I think at this point, you're right. It doesn't take much. Like, even if 50% of those militia forces stay, that's probably enough to kill enough people for the people to come out, get shot at, then go back in and not come back out, which is the worst case scenario, right? So I think you were talking about it. The regime supporters themselves have this like psychological issue that the militias don't when they want to kill people. As for running their just general day-to-day operations, I think that's what we're targeting more than like the military funding, because like it doesn't take much for the speedboats to lay mines, enforce, shoot, militias, whatever. But it does take a lot for them to keep their day-to-day operations going. So if the regime supporters suddenly, who are used to these very lavish lives, lose all of their wealth and they become poor, I think that's going to be a greater issue for them than the the military aspect of it. That's just what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, but let's say, for example, 95% of the armed forces of the regime will be like, "Where's my money? I'm not going to work for you if you don't pay me," right? But what if we have 5% of the regime forces who are like, "I will die for Islam and for my supreme leader and the Durka Durka Jihadi stuff. I don't need to get paid. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because I believe in this stuff." And what if that 5% is enough? That's what I'm worried about.
That's already taken into account. I'm 100% confident in this, that that's already taken into account into their plans. That
Right.
5%, one way or another, was going to have to be eliminated, whether we win or this drags out. They were always going to have to go, and the way I'm imagining that is like we come out, and then those Israeli drones come in from above, hit the checkpoints, hit the machine guns, stuff like that, arm some of the people, give them weapons. Yeah, but you already knew that they're going to have to
Yeah.
either way.
Yeah. I think the solution to that at some point again is, I mean, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, is to arm the Iranian people to fight that remaining 5%. Because I do think that remaining 5% will always be there and will always be an issue. And before we get an army of ourselves, like before we become a free country that has an army that could, because these people, this 5% that I'm talking about, they're going to continue being an issue even after Iran is liberated. They're going to be our, they're going to be our Hamas. They're going to be like the Hamas is to Israel. That's what they're going to be to us, right? We have to deal with them eventually when we have our own army. But in this, this transition period, I think the Iranian people, without even us having our army back, should just be armed so that they could basically, I mean, that's actually what happened in Israel, right? Israel, before we had Israel, the Jews were arming themselves to fight against the Arabs even before Israel became a country. So I think that we have to eventually go through a same period. So I think this is why I keep saying, like, arm the Iranian people, and I keep saying that that needs to become more of a discussion. And I also appreciate Mark Levin, because he recently has become a huge advocate for that, for arming the Iranian people. I think, Jeffrey, is your mic working now? Okay, go ahead. Yes, fantastic.
Sorry, yeah. We had
That's
technical difficulties. All good observations. I'm going to touch on some of them. So, as some of you've already kind of hit on, first, strikes are not off the table. Combat power in the region is twice what it was prior to February 28th. So, if President Trump gives the go ahead to Pete Hegseth and Pete goes full bore, the regime remnants is going to experience something that even the previous ass whooping doesn't come close to. That being said, the operational part of the reasoning for the operational pause is in no insignificant manner due to the fact that President Trump is trying to preserve some of the infrastructure for the Iranian people so they don't have to build everything out of rubble. Mullah remnants doesn't seem like they want to allow that to happen. The economic impact is of the blockade is very much being amplified by Operation Economic Fury. You have them, currently some key lines of action are ending all oil sanctions waivers. That includes secondary sanctions on foreign banks and entities, and billionaires like operating out of Russia and Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state. They're already hitting the, how do we pronounce this? The Shamkhani? How do you say it? Like how you guys would say it?
Shamkhani.
Thank you. I can't do the right. Forgive me. Thank you, Arvin. The Shamkhani network.
No, try it. Shamkhani.
Shamkhani network. That's the best I could do at this moment.
Okay.
So they're already hitting those guys, right? So you have these multi-billion-dollar oil smuggling operations. The idea of trying to do oil for gold, we're already targeting that. Here's another key part that's going on, is that the regime is absolutely shattered. All the indicators shows that. You now have what essentially is a civil war going on inside the regime, right? So clerical, you have the civilian leadership, clerics, IRGC. Think about what happened when we took out the Ayatollah. One of the core elements, like the keystone of the mullah regime's mythos, was this guy is the ultimate grand poobah, and we're resisting because, forgive me, Shem, that week. The IRGC is resisting because he's got it from, Allah's lips to his ears and all the rest of it. I mean, you have IRGC now just taking off the uniform and fleeing into surrounding countries. You have IRGC remnants saying that they disagree with the civilian leadership and will not take orders from him. You have the clerics that have been obliterated. You have all this intra-regime infighting going on. So that has both positives and negatives to it. This kind of ties into what Armin said. The positives is it's very hard for them to maintain continuity of mission, message, and effort throughout all of Iran. It also means that, it's hard to get people to come to a deal, which is why, like, Donald's like, look, we got to get somebody to come here. Even if you do, who's to say that some crazy Durka douchebag like, remnant says they don't really care. They're going to do whatever they're going to do. So that's, again, why two things are important of this group and what Armin and Tusi and Goldie and all this people in this room and everybody waging the battle of the narratives is two things. One is to win the battle of the narratives, to set up the political capita so that track 2 material support, sustained legal track 2 material support at the non-lesser and kinetic type can be provided to Iranian resistance so that they can finally realize liberating Iran from the mullah regime that's occupying them since 79.
Jeffrey, I have a quick question for you, and just quickly, somebody posted a super chat on YouTube saying Trump already said he would treat the small fast boats like the drug boats in the Caribbean. Boom, boom. Last 2 nights, Jeffrey, why haven't we already seen, why have the speedboats been not attacked? Like, we haven't seen, the videos that we saw from the Venezuelan, drug boats being blown up. Why haven't we seen anything like that right now in the Persian Gulf? So go ahead, Jeffrey.
We did. So the initial strikes against the mullah regime focused on some key capabilities: strategic radar, air defense, C4SR, missile cities, WD stockpiles, leadership bunkers for IRG, besiege, Navy, right? We sank all their conventional Navy. The mullah regime spent, we did hit a lot of their fast boats. That said, the mullah regime invested 40 years in procuring and developing roughly about 12 to 1,500 fast attack boats. That's part of their Mosquito fleet asymmetric counter. And they put them inside these kind of hardened, I don't know, almost like a Quonset hut. So think of like a sewer pipe, right? That's hardened that they parked the boat inside. We hit a lot of them. I mean, they also try to hide some of them. So we're in the process of taking them out. I promise you, if once they make that run, those guys are dead. That said, it's true. The IRGC is indeed leveraging, dripping out a couple at a time. Just recently, you had 3 commercial ships attacked with fast attack boats of the Mosquito fleet via, small arms. The other issue is the IRGC remnant said they're going to target underwater cables and all the rest of it to it's kind of like the cyber, it's kind of like the physical critical infrastructure version of cyber warfare to kind of cause economic or e-commerce damage to the Gulf states, not the and or say, Amazon, all the rest of them that built their stuff there. So you can bet your Aunt Susie's ash can, because I got to be nice, otherwise Goldie will yell at me for cussing. We are maintaining a heightened level of awareness on the Strait of Hormuz, and if they try that run, you either won't get a good run, you're not gonna succeed, and if you do, it'll only be one time, because after that you're done.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, Jeffrey. All right. Who's next?
Next to respond is Daniel Dom.
So on my impression is that there will be no uprising like we saw in January. People will not go protest on streets, but I do believe it will be more a guerrilla fight, and they will hunt down small groups of Basiji and the IRGC, all those who are looking to kill innocents in the street or go up to people's houses, and they will just start an armed resistance. And while this is happening, I believe the next logical thing is to the Americans and Israelis go strike all the economical objects that bring fast income, so that they are making the IRGC positions worse and worse and worse. And today we know that police officers and all the low ranks are not getting paid, from what I heard. So the situation with the money will be just worse and worse, while people like the good Iranians are fighting back all those militias and all those who came from Afghanistan and Iraq.
Right. So two things: for the Iranian people to fight, like a guerrilla warfare against Islamic Republic, they need to be armed, and they don't have enough guns. This is why I constantly say we need to start talking about arming the Iranian people. That's one. Two, I hope we get to the point where that happens at some point, right? That you're saying. But even if that happens, it doesn't mean that we're not going to see an uprising like we saw early January. The only thing is that would be the last phase. Like, that should be the final push. That shouldn't be, given that what we saw early January and the level of massacre that the Islamic Republic is capable of doing. I think we should not do that again until we know that we're not going to pay such a heavy price ever for it again. But I know that if the Islamic Republic is going to fall, that will happen one more time, and it's going to be so much bigger than what we saw in early January. The only difference is that it has to be done once everything else has been done. Once the Islamic Republic has been disarmed. I mean, at the end of the day, if we get to the final phase, it's only natural for the Iranian people to come out. Like, if we, at some point, when you get to the point where, like, let's say you have done all the phases, military operations by United States and Israel, the blockade on the Iranian ports, the destruction of the killing of so many other regime officials and checkpoints and whoever is basically killing the Iranian people. Let's say we have all of that by the Americans and Israelis. And let's say we also go through a phase of the Iranian people getting armed and fighting against the regimes in guerrilla warfare as well. Let's say we go through all of these steps. What is the end of all of this? We are going to get to a position where at some point we're saying the regime has been defeated to the point where they can't suppress the Iranian people. As soon as the Iranian people realize that we're at that point, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to come into the streets, right? They're going to come into the streets, and they're going to fill the streets. I mean, if they came into the streets when the regime was still in power in the millions, What do you think is going to happen when they realize that the regime is not able to defend itself anymore? Of course, they're going to come into the streets. But the only difference is that we don't want to use that tactic as an intermediary tactic. We want to use that as a final push. It needs to be the final push. It cannot be one of the strategies that we have in the middle because they're unarmed and they cannot defend themselves. Only after we've done everything else, that will be the final push that will be done by the Iranian people.
And also, I think one good indication will be when we are when we are getting to the end of it, is when all the European nations such as Spain, France, Great Britain, and etc. will actually like speak openly about all the massacre, speak openly about that the Iranians hate this regime, that this regime has no popularity in Iran. And when we will hear that stuff are coming more and more, I believe this will be an indication that stuff are going really well in this war.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, you're right because the Europeans will only support the Iranian people when they think the Iranian people are about to win. If they think the Islamic Republic has any chance for survival, they would be holding back to some extent. This is actually let me say something very interesting, okay? Because the world looks at Europe as if they stand for human rights, and they look at United States and Israel as if they violate human rights. But you can see that in the greatest massacre of our modern history, it was the Europeans, it was the European not Europeans, it was the European leaders who betrayed the Iranian people when they were being oppressed, and it was the Americans and Israelis who came to their aid. So all of this talk of human rights has always it was all fake. It was all virtue signaling. The very two countries that constantly get accused of violating human rights, those were the countries that came to the aid of the Iranian people when they needed them. All right, who's next?
Next we have Cat Lady.
Yes, if we're talking about steps to come, right? I'm thinking about money because money and factions are a thing, right? So what happens when you have to choose who you have to pay? You have two militaries. Which one are you going to pay? More than likely, they're going to pay our IRGC, and Artesh is not going to get that money. How does that change the equation onto who will they side with? What about the merchants? The merchants aren't going to get any relief. They are the ones that started this whole thing. How many factions, how many people in government are going to start to see their pay cut, even though they've already under an enormous strain, which is what started this whole thing? So, how much this economic angle is very important, but it also affects, I think, the factions. I think you spoke and showed us videos of people and commanders and people that say, like, we want to quit, we want to defect. I think that would increase. So, that's another step that we would see before like the streets going crazy. We would see larger defections or larger rumblings of people not getting paid, people with guns not getting paid. I don't know if I'm right about this. This is just an inference I'm making.
So you're right that I also suspect that people's payments are going to get cut. I think the armed forces are the last to get cut. Right? Like they're going to basically, the Islamic Republic, if they run out of money, they're going to cut other people's pay in order to be able to pay the armed forces. So the last one to go, because they know their survival depends on the armed forces, right? And also they're going to be printing like there's no tomorrow. Like they already are printing like there's no tomorrow, but they're going to increase that, printing money. And basically that's another way of taking money from the people. When you print more money and you cause more inflation, you're taking the wealth of people who have money, like already have some money, and you're making their money being worth less and increasing the money that is you're holding on to because you have access to the printers, right? So that's also a form of, like, printing more money is also a form of theft from the Iranian people. And but they're going to harm everybody, and they're going to try to keep the people with guns happy. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I think if they had to pick, would they cut both of their pay or would they keep Artesh down and IRGC up?
Oh yeah, no, they don't give a crap about the Artesh. You're right. They will keep IRGC, and in fact, not only that, they have been cutting Artesh's budget and increasing IRGC's budget for years now. Right. So
Did
this
they
is just
cut
going to be a
medical
continuation.
aid to Artesh? I heard something about that. They wouldn't send medical
I
aid to
didn't.
Artesh.
I did not hear that. So if I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised though. I would. I just want to. By the way, I just want to read something. Um, this needs to be confirmed, but Sohail just sent me a post, and he wanted me to read this. Since the start of the war, the number of Iranians executed by the Islamic Republic is greater than the number of Israeli soldiers killed. So the Islamic Republic has. Oh yeah, actually that is true. Like I know that should be true actually. So the Islamic Republic has managed to kill more Iranians than Israelis in this war easily. Yeah, you're right. Jeffrey is saying easily in the chat. Yes, which is another demonstration that the Islamic Republic is at war with the Iranian people more than it's at war with anything else.